Guys, and welcome to my channel again. I am Mickey the Bookworm, and this is only my second video on this channel. Today I'm going to give you guys a little bit of an idea of what I read in March, and I was a little bit hesitant to do this because honestly March was not the best reading month for me, just because I was kind of in a slump with everything that was going on and everything moving work to my house and all the different organization and stuff that had to be going on. I just didn't really do as much reading in March. I found some other things to do, but I did read several books, so we're going to go ahead and get started. The other thing I want to clarify is a lot of these books are ebooks or library books that I had to return to the library, and so I didn't necessarily have a physical copy here to show you guys. Also, I'm working off of a Samsung phone, and as far as I know, I can't actually flip the video. So yeah, they're gonna appear on the screen backwards, and when I go back and edit this, I'm gonna try to put the cover of the books over in this corner so that you can actually see what they look like. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. The first book that I read in March was called Logging Off by Nick Spalding. This was a copy that I got off of NetGalley in exchange for an honest review, and I honestly really liked it. I gave it 4 stars, and I just thought that the characters in the book were really lovable and pretty well written, and there's a lot of bumbling going on. It was really humorous. I really enjoyed it overall. If you don't know, it's about a guy who is like having these health problems, and like he's got a crick in his neck and he's got irritable bowel syndrome and like all this stuff is going on, and finally his doctor tells him to just take a break from social media and electronic stuff and to just basically go on a smartphone fast and only use the internet for work and hook his landline back up. And so at first he's really grumpy about it because he has an app for literally everything. But then as it starts to get going, he starts to see some value in it, and his friend, who is a writer for a newspaper, picks up the story and does it to kind of help give him some accountability, and then this whole kind of community forms off of it. Mostly, I really liked the storyline. I liked the characters, like I said. My only complaint with that book was in the very end when he's talking about his fast and like what he's learned from it and everything, and when he finally breaks the fast, because eventually that has to happen, right? That's not really a spoiler. When he breaks the fast, he starts talking about the things that he's learned, and it came across as like suddenly philosophical in the middle of this, or I should say at the end of this humorous book. And so it came across as kind of forced, like it was trying too hard to be deep in that moment, and I didn't really love that. But other than that, I thought it was an enjoyable story overall. The next book was called The Millionaire Next Door. I had heard of this book before, and it's kind of dated. Like the statistics are literally as old as I am, but there's some really timeless truths in it. And it's basically like the whole gist is millionaires in America are not really the kind of people that you would think that they would be. Like the wealthy in America usually are like really low key about it. They're not necessarily driving the fanciest cars or wearing the most designer clothing or anything like that. They don't necessarily have the most impressive houses. They got to the financial position that they're in by working really hard and saving a lot of money and being smart about investments. And so really, like, anybody in America can do that, which I thought was really helpful. So there were definitely some timeless truths in it, even if the statistics in it were like, wow, those are really old. The next one that I is called Make a Living Living by Nina Karnikowski. And this book was also a NetGalley copy before it was published. And so I got it as an ebook, and it would only download on my phone because it wouldn't go to the Kindle app. Like, I had to get a specific app for it, and so that was a pain. And I could tell, like, the book was probably really great. Like, I could see it being like a great coffee table book on glossy paper. I ended up giving this 4 stars, I think. I really liked how it was honest about entrepreneurship and that there's struggles and you make sacrifices if you go out on a limb to do your dream. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, and not everybody makes like $2 million off of it right out the gate. Like, it's hard and it takes time. But at the same time, it was like, you could tell that these people had been willing to make the sacrifices that they had made to follow their dreams. And some of them had some really cool jobs and were able to build some really cool businesses off of just doing what they love to do. So I thought that was a really cool book, and it was short, and it was just like a nice, like, afternoon of reading about something positive, which is definitely something that I needed for this month. And I ended up giving it 4 stars. Like I said, my only real complaint about it was the formatting. All right, the next book that I read this month was Lilac Girls by Martha Hall Kelly, and I freaking adored this book. I know it got really popular and it was really hyped for a while, and I didn't know how I was going to receive it, honestly. It's World War II fiction, which is like one of those things that I am like constantly reading and don't really know why, but I read so much World War II fiction. And basically it's about a New York socialite who is really into like charity. She works for the French embassy as World War II is heating up. And so it starts out like in the late 1930s, and people are starting to try to get out of Europe, and the US is making it really, really hard for them to get visas. And it also follows the story of a German girl who gets recruited to work as a camp doctor at Ravensbrück in Poland, and a couple of Polish girls who end up getting sent to Ravensbrück and experimented on. So all of these people come together in this story, and it doesn't stop after the end of the war, which I really appreciated. One of my big issues with World War II fiction, as much as I read it, is so much of it stops when the war ends. And like, life didn't stop when the war ended, and people lost whole chunks of their families, and Europe was totally torn apart. And I think as Americans, we all kind of go like, oh, well, the war ended and our boys came home, and then we went into the economic boom that was the 1950s, and everything was okay again once the war ended. And that's just not what happened for most of the world. And so I really appreciated how this book continued after the war, and how these women had to kind of face what life looked like after it was over and find healing and try to kind of rebuild their lives again. So I really loved this book. I thought it was beautiful. I loved the way that the stories came together. Highly recommend, 5 stars. All right, the next book that I read in March, I read for book club with 3 blondes and a book. This is the 3rd month that they've done a book club and that I have participated in it, and we read The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. This was a Newbery Medal winner, and it's a middle grade, although I was kind of surprised because it read a little bit more like a young adult novel. I'm not usually a middle grade reader, and I'm not usually that into fantasy. I just read this because of the book club. but oh my word, this book was beautiful. I absolutely adored it. I loved Luna as a character. I really loved all the characters. The writing about the magic was beautiful. The writing style was amazing. And there was just so much packed into this book. I would actually love to see a prequel so that I could get a little bit more of Zan, the older witch's story, and that I could see like reading sequels too. I would love to read more. I would love to see a story from another character's point of view. I loved this book so much, and there was so much in it. So if you don't know the premise, I'll just read from the little synopsis. Every year, the people of the Protectorate leave a baby as an offering to the witch who lives in the forest. They hope this sacrifice will keep her from terrorizing their town. But the witch in the forest, Zan, is kind. She shares her home with a wise swamp monster, and a perfectly tiny dragon. Zan rescues the children and delivers them to welcoming families on the other side of the forest, nourishing the babies with starlight on the journey. One year, Zan accidentally feeds a baby moonlight instead of starlight, filling the ordinary child with extraordinary magic. Zan decides she must raise this girl, whom she calls Luna, as her own. As Luna's 13th birthday approaches, her magic begins to emerge with dangerous consequences. Meanwhile, a young man from the Protectorate is determined to free his people by killing the witch. Deadly birds with uncertain intentions flock nearby. A volcano, quiet for centuries, rumbles just beneath the Earth's surface, and the woman with the tiger's heart is on the prowl. So if you haven't read it yet, again, 5 out of 5 stars. Highly, highly recommend. It's fabulous. All right, and there's 2 more books that I read this month. One is called Upstairs at the White House by J.B. West. It's nonfiction. J.B. West, the author, was the chief usher at the White House starting in 1941, I think, and went all the way up to when he retired just after Richard Nixon was elected. And so basically for a pretty decent portion of the 20th century, this guy worked at the White House and was in close contact with the presidents and first ladies of the time. And so he wrote about his life working for them, and there's a lot of insider details about the presidents and their wives from those time periods. But it's very respectful. It's not like a tell-all, and I just felt like I learned a lot from it about how historically the White House operated and about those presidents and first ladies that I wouldn't necessarily have learned anywhere else. So he was through, let's see if I can get them all, Roosevelt, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, and then he retired like right after Nixon was elected. So pretty good. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, I mean, it was dated, but it was some really cool information about things I wouldn't have learned otherwise. The last book that I read for March was Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I don't know if I will ever find a book again that I love this much. I am not actually a rereader. I am really careful about like what I keep on my shelves. You're gonna see a lot of these like move around and go away because I really don't keep very many of my books. Usually once I read a book, I have gotten the information that I want to get from it, or I've read the story and I know the story and I don't feel the need to reread it again. There's a few exceptions, but most of these books behind me are gonna like cycle in and out. I give a lot of my books away or resell them, and I don't keep a lot of them. I am actually debating whether or not to keep this book. That's how much I love this book. I don't know if I would actually reread it, but I love it so much. I think I just want it for my collection. Like, I just adored this book. So definitely 5 out of 5 stars. I wasn't sure what I was going to think about it because I went into it not really knowing much about it. I don't think I read the synopsis. I just like knew it was super hyped and I was like, okay, well, I should read this. I wonder if it's really worth the hype. It's worth the hype, believe me. The writing in this is absolutely beautiful. There's so much packed into the story, again, but it's handled really, really well. So it's a murder mystery, and it is a coming of age story. It's about this girl who lives in the swamp marshes off the coast of North Carolina and how she's treated differently, like really no better than a person of color would have been during that time in the 50s and 60s. And basically it's just like she ends up abandoned and she has to learn how to survive on her own, and she makes a couple of friends along the way that help her, and she falls in love a couple of times, and there's just a lot going on in here. Just like her growing up and her whole story, it was just so great. And then the murder mystery comes in and ties in. Without giving spoilers, I will say there's a red herring toward the end. So I think if it hadn't been for that red herring, I totally would have expected the ending, but I actually fell for the red herring, and that's not actually that usual for me. Now that I've said that, you guys are probably going to be like, you're going to read it and you're going to be like, oh, I totally saw that coming. But like I said, I fell for the red herring. So I was surprised at the end. But this is just such a beautiful book, and it has so much to say about growing up and being different in a society that expects conformity, and how prejudiced people can be, and how gifted people can be, and wonderful if you get a chance to know them. And it says a lot about nature too, which I love because I'm from a rural state and I love being outside in nature. I just highly recommend. 5 out of 5 stars. So that's pretty much my reading for March, and I'm going to do a video soon with my April TBR and a readathon that I'll be participating in. So look for that video coming up soon. I hope you guys will come back and watch it.